I did want to just kind of set the container of connecting with each of you, and then going into a lot of the stuff we've been going into within the Telegram group with the specific meditations on abundance. When I was kind of just exploring the topic of what we could dive into today, was really on the notion, which I think is really a prevalent theme throughout the entirety of the group, around this topic of abundance, meaning that, abundance isn't necessarily in the things that are around us, relationships, objects, possessions, experiences. It's more so the, vibratory field, the oscillation that we have embodied. And then what that looks like and what that means in regards to the practicalities of experiences and objects. So it's kind of like we're putting the cart behind the horse instead of in front of the horse, and it's such an endlessly refined process in my experience, because it is a process of really coming into an ownership. Ownership's probably not the best word, but a clear recognition of the source of abundance, the source of light, the source of joy, the source of peace, et cetera, et cetera. And yesterday I did a quick live on Instagram where I described a really nice metaphor, an example, which I've used before, but it was just a nice refresher within my own space. And, hopefully for those who have watched it, or, as I share it right now, which is the example of if we were the sun, if we were hypothetically the sun that we look out up in the sky, and as the sun, we were looking out and seeing all this light everywhere, and questioning as the sun, seeing all this light, where is this light coming from? Like, why is everything so lit up? This would be quite an interesting, exploration and inquiry, because of course, in that moment of inquiring, we have forgotten that the reason why everything is lit up is because of ourselves. We are the sun that has lit up everything that we're perceiving, and we're asking the question, well, where is this light coming from? And I just found that really funny, because in the topic of abundance, and I was specifically going on the idea of attention being currency, where we place our attention being currency, but not so much the idea that, okay, if we place our attention on money or good relationships or nice experiences, all that, that's going to result in us experiencing abundance. That's not necessarily the case. It's recognizing that the source of attention, like what is the actual source of this light, going back to the sun example, and coming to a true understanding of that. Like, what is the truth about the fact that all the light that the sun is observing and seeing, if it had, the ability to see or whatever, which it does in a sense, we would recognize that the source of light that we're seeing everywhere is actually coming from ourselves. So in this case, the source of attention, the source of abundance, the source of joy, the source of everything that we perceive, source of consciousness is our true identity. The very identity in which we are is actually what's giving light to everything in which is being perceived. And in this realm, we are co-creating reality. We're not just creating everything, and everybody is just this kind of illusionary, figment. I mean, in a sense it is, but we have to stay practical in the relative sense, and not, get to, filled with pride of this idea that we just create, we co-create amongst many other beings in this realm. But on the fundamental level, we can see that everything that is given rise, within consciousness, everything that is perceived is in fact a product of the very attention in which we are. So on the topic of abundance, creating abundance in a time where, it seems, very much like there's scarcity everywhere, people are filled with all these fears of scarcity and all this stuff. Well, the reality is we are the source of the abundance we are seeking. And if we can recognize and realize this first and foremost, what comes from that is actually a sense of appreciation and gratitude and joyfulness and fulfillment, all just based on the fact that we recognize that we can create these feelings within ourselves for no reason at all. It's like love is not conditional. So unconditional love is just a silly topic. Love is already what it is. So by recognizing this, we see for no reason at all, we can ignite this loving joyfulness, this appreciation, and all of the things that come with that. And then just by the product of simple law of attraction, if we go back to the most fundamental kind of personal development teaching, we can see that based on this oscillation that we have recognized and remembered and realized that that is our true identity, we are mirrored that in our hologram. We are mirrored the abundance and the preferences that we are looking for, based on the specifics of whatever we're focused on, like if it's money, it's money. If it's relationships, if it's, travel, if it, whatever the various types of relative experiences we can have, that all just will match up very, very simply, very naturally, with no real strain. And, oftentimes, like we covered last week, um, many people have had kind of a bad taste left in their mouth from many of these abundance manifestation groups, law of attraction courses, spending thousands and thousands of dollars on these techniques and methods and all that. When in reality, like literally, in my view, if you just practice what I gave you last week, what I've just given out for free, you're firstly going to save yourself a lot more money in personal development manifestation groups, for one. But second, real results will actually come, because the results we're looking for is actually the oscillation inwardly. We're looking to feel abundance as a vibrational tone, as a vibrational sense, in a constant way. And in that sense, then the manifestations that we're looking for, they'll match up much more naturally, right? Because as we covered as well, much of the conditioning we have around desires is kind of this falsely mixed combination of needs and wants. We've made wants into needs, and we've forgotten about true needs and are just seeking wants. So it's this real kind of weird combination there. So as we come back to fundamentally, what is an actual need for this body, for fulfillment, for basic level peace, which is our true nature, then we dissolve many of the false wants and desires that cause so much suffering due to the nature of striving for them endlessly. So yeah, so this is an initial kind of message. I was going to let everyone open, but then I just, I'll have to inform, I guess, about what we're doing, or what we're, setting up here. But if there's anything that anyone feels called to share, based on maybe for those who are, doing the meditations from the group or not, whatever. I know there's a couple new people in here who weren't there last week or in the group. If you do feel called to share anything, or if there's any questions on the technique, because we went through very specific, like the specific details on the technique, there's always clarifications there, so I can help with that. But yeah, so if there's anything else on Facebook for those watching, but if not, I do have some things that I like to get into too. So either way, it's all good. But I think you can unmute yourself if there's anything that feel called to share, or in the chat. Last days I've been trying to distinguish between the needs and wants. I feel you on that. Adisa, if you feel called to share more on that, like with audio, feel free, but I can also just dive into things. But we could also have just a conversation on it as well. If you want to share, I can also just keep going. Oh, there we
Yeah,
go. Hey, man.
I would like to. Hi. Um, just today, I've been confronted with this mm, something like hopelessness, but not in a negative sense. That the driving factor that keeps on driving the mental game of desires and striving for them, and then when uh, I come in terms of face to face with this, that total hopelessness, that this is it, that there is no more hope other than this, what is there right now. And that then the connotation of this hopelessness shifted into something that the hopelessness word doesn't have any quality anymore. It's just you know, the connotation behind that word has been lost, and it's discovered that okay, that the hope is the false hope in a sense, that's the driving factor, and that is to be watched for.
So do you feel the sense of, yeah, oscillating between desire and then a dissolution of those desires, or how is that unfolding for you?
um Yeah, much of the things that have been perceived as that some things that I need, it's more and more being discovered. Okay, it's some simply things that I want because of these are so-called standard things that one must have,
Mm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's not very easy to come face to face with all these additional things that have been accumulated, but yeah, that's what I've been trying to see, that okay, what is the things that I really really need, and there's not much, really not much.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel you on that. I mean, I feel, obviously speaking to, the path that you've been on, that we've both been on, and in specific lights to, maybe Ross are just various levels of seeking and stuff like this. I mean, I mean, obviously, that I feel is a topic for everyone to a certain degree. It becomes this kind of yeah, key kind of point. I mean, it's not just a point on the journey, as it's like this endless unfolding of this uncovering of what may have been so important for a period of time, and then all of a sudden it's just kind of like the rug is pulled and you see, like, well, it really doesn't have the weight that I may have given it. And one thing that I was actually inquiring on before the session on how we can kind of explore today was on the idea of abundance, and understanding that, really the true essence of abundance, as we've been exploring, is the feeling state of abundance that we experience inwardly. But most importantly, it, to create anything new, or for anything else to continue to come into our experience, it's kind of this simultaneity of both being desireless, while also being in a deep sense of appreciation and gratitude for what is present. Because naturally we could say that desirelessness doesn't even really exist, because all of the universe is being moved by desire in some form, like the ultimate desire for the source to expand in itself. So in so many ways, it's this kind of the desireless process, at least in my experience, is this it's this focalizing of all desire upon the single desire, the ultimate desire to know truth, to know, the source of being, to know the source of love, these various kind of interchangeable intentions, and that being kind of the fundamental focus, which then dissolves all of the, like you're saying, like these wants that really aren't actually necessary. They're not. And in so many ways, like when we look at the idea of like simple law of attraction, for instance, like say there is something that we actually desire to manifest, the only way we actually can manifest any particular desire is if we are perpetually holding and resting in a vibratory experience of gratitude and appreciation. Because at any moment in which we're in a space where there is that longing, that's in so many ways why it's being pushed away, right? Like whatever particular desire that we may have. So the journey of dissolving into that desireless energy, as you're describing, and what I've experienced as well, I definitely can relate to that topic of the hopelessness. Because it's like, it's not even like a hopelessness, like you're saying. It's like, it's not necessarily like a negative connotation to it, as much as it is maybe more of a surrender, like a complete surrender to life exactly as it's appearing, to appreciate life exactly as it's appearing. And thus in so many ways, that appreciation, it's kind of like almost the grace, or the glue that kind of continues to keep existence intact. Because in certain light, we can say that if we have no appreciation for anything that's here, that's in so many ways that what actually like dissolves it, like destroys creation. It's like in the Bible, Jesus had mentioned, like, something along the lines of appreciating what you have, or everything will be taken away. Like acknowledging everything that you have, or everything will be taken away. Because it's appreciation which actually acts as the glue, or the attractor field for life as it's appearing now to be exactly as it's appearing now. Like the only way that it could be the way it is if there is some level of appreciation and acceptance. Acceptance may even be a more accurate term of life exactly as it is, appearing exactly as it is, and then being in such love with that. And I feel like it's a great piece that you brought up there. Because um I feel like the majority of people on the path who equate the topic of desirelessness on the topic of awakening and things like this, um, there's kind of this weird connotation with this desirelessness, it's especially in the new age scene, because the feminine essence is being more emergent, right? And the feminine teachings are very much about desire, like the movement of creation, the movement of that ultimate devotion and love. So desirelessness has this interesting idea, but in truth, living within that ultimate desire of love, and allowing desire to naturally bloom, in my view, is equal to living in a desireless state, because in so many ways they're one and the same, right? And so like the kind of the ego, I guess, in a certain way, um again, in my experience, is what I've observed is, as those desires in my journey were being dissolved, in all respects, like, I don't know, desires for food. I remember one fast I was doing. It was a small fast years ago. It was like 3 days or something. I was doing a fast, and I was lying on my couch meditating, and all of a sudden I had this huge epiphany just open up, because it was like day 3 or 4, and I had no desire to eat. And I was like, wait a minute, like, if I don't need to eat, like, what do I need? You know what I mean? Like, what would I possibly need? Like, I'm on my couch, I'm in complete bliss, just meditating, I have no desire for food. I'm like, what could I possibly need from here? And that just opened up a whole new, realm. And then, I did a 40-day fast and so many things after that. But um it was such an interesting process, because that's also happened to me with money. It's happened to me with sex. It's happened to me with many different things that, at least at previous periods of my life, were so prominently important. Like they held such weight, such energy of my day went to fulfilling these things, and or fulfilling some hope, like you're saying, like some hope, just continuing to fuel some hope of what could come with these things at some later date, some later moment or something,
Yeah,
um
and also there was one thing I'm also struggling with, or not exactly struggling, but this still not being clear in my perception, is that acceptance versus striving. That there are some things that need to be taken responsibility for, and then there is a simple example that if there is a clutter in my house, things are just piled up, and so I, then I wake up every day. It's like fully clear with full. Uh, it's as it's completely new state of. It's like a blank slate,
mhm.
and then everything is perfect. But it feels like somehow I cannot command this perfection into doing anything about things. That is just like
Yeah,
it's as if it doesn't do anything.
I understand. Yeah, I
and
understand.
then I am into this mode right now. How much I accept, and what is the thing that I say, okay, this is not acceptable,
Mm,
and then I need to take from here things into my hand and see where is the dark points, or what things in my being that are still bringing up these same situations again and again into my life, the same patterns that are not serving me. I see that they are not uh, they're harmful, but I still engaged in some of those cycles or patterns. And
mm.
so my struggle is right now, what is the how much is striving and how much is acceptance, and how to balance these things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great piece there. Because there's a couple things that came up when you mentioned that, and the first thing that came up was the topic of acceptance, not being the topic of acceptance. Like all topics, it's like initially they may start as like an idea or as a teaching, as a concept, and over time, as we explore that concept, it turns into wisdom and an actual embodied direction, because it's actually the concept that's actually being dissolved. What's happening is we're actually being reminded of this principle inwardly that really can't be defined as anything in particular, you see. So when it comes to like the idea of acceptance or any topic, we have to be very careful on seeing what is being kind of idolized, idealized, held on to as a dogma or as a concept within the mind, versus what is actually being directly applied in clear fashion, like an actual moment to moment fashion, right? It's kind of like the teaching of doing non-doing, you know, in Buddhism. So many people got that confused, right? Where they think that you just be and you can't and there's times for being and there's times for doing. Well, we can say on a practical sense, yes, sure, that may make sense, but in reality, being and doing are always happening together. There's no separation between them, you know. So the idea of acceptance, it's kind of like that same thing where acceptance is a because you know when we think of time, when you think, okay, in this moment, like if we're saying the mess, like in this moment I observe this mess and I'm just accepting the mess, you know what I mean, like I'm accepting this mess. But in reality, that single moment is broken down into the most like minute of fractional moments that we could say that initially we can come to this place of accepting the mess, but in the micro moment next to it, there could be a natural new arising that says, okay, now it's time to sweep the room, now it's time to clean it up, now it's time to, you know. And so in that moment, now there's a new opportunity for acceptance because we're accepting the fact that there's a natural arising to clean the room, you see. So acceptance can't be defined as anything in particular, like it doesn't look like anything in particular. And the moment we have that idea that, you know, like being is like this, doing is like this, acceptance is like this, you know, like all these ideas, and we crystallize those ideas, that's actually where we get into to a trap, because it's this kind of it's just held as an idea, and then we take that idea and we kind of place it on to everything, you know. Like it's like, okay, yeah, there's a mess and I'm just going to accept the mess, and then even though there may be a natural feeling or a natural movement to want to clean up the mess, we could say that in that moment we're actually not accepting that moment, because there's a feeling to want to clean it, and we're saying, oh no, I just got to accept the mess, you know what I mean, like it's a really funny thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it makes sense, yeah.
yeah, perfectly.
Yeah, so I that's such a thing that I feel we endlessly explore in the domain of the human realm, because as you're saying, it's like we can come to know the truth of being and realize the nature of source, but then the actual element of embodiment of that, like the allowing for that grace to pour into every crevice of life, I feel like that's actually the true humbling, because you know it's like it never ends, you know, like it's a never ending clearing. The beauty, as I talked about this yesterday in Instagram, was like when we're focused on realizing the nature of source as a primary, you know, as you know, as the step one, it makes all the other steps way easier versus going the other way around, you know. It's like trying to make our relative life look perfect without knowing the source of where all the relative aspects of existence actually come from. It's a very tricky thing to do it that way, because you're endlessly caught up in these experiences where you think you've mastered something, and because of that mastery, there's kind of this pride that emerges, and then in the next moment you face an aspect of your life where you haven't mastered, and then you're humbled back down, and it's extremely you know, it's like it's extremely daunting. It creates so much suffering for people, because they put the cart in front of the horse, you know. It's like thinking, if I master life in these different categories, then I will feel absolutely fulfilled. But it's endlessly, you know, as you know, obviously it's endlessly not, you know, fulfilling. So we're reversing that. But it doesn't the funny thing is, now with that reversal, it actually makes the exploration of specific mastery, like mastering how to clean your room or whatever, you know, um, it's just as humbling. It's just that you're on a foundation that's rock solid, right? Where you're not attached to the fact that the room has to be cleaned per se, because it actually doesn't matter in the end. And this is something that I find so mind-blowing for people when it comes to awakening, is like you can have an enlightened, awakened being that is an asshole, you know what I mean? Like,
I remember you have been saying that for. I heard from you from a long time that I think when you said that first time, I still laugh on the memories of.
yeah, it's funny, you know. It was a mind-blowing discovery on my experience that, you know, for so long we've lived that way, where, you know, like for instance, I've given this example before, like Genghis Khan was known to be like maximally enlightened, you know. And look how many people he killed, whatever. So but I find that's an old paradigm. I think we're in a time now, I know we're in a time now where both of the worlds have to merge. They are merging, right? Where there's a realization of the nature of source, which then, from that vantage point, it doesn't matter what you eat, it doesn't matter your attitude, it doesn't even really matter your ethics. None of those things actually matter because you've come to a place of knowing the truth. But at the same time, I feel like that's just the more kind of black or white masculine type of viewpoint, where when we emerge into the feminine essence, there's an endless discovery then from that point. Like this is where, in my view, I've explained this many times past year or so, I view that awakening to then be the doorway to eternity. Because like you're saying, you come to the fact that you got to learn to clean the room, or we come to the fact that we got to deal with our relationships in this way, our money better, or this, there's endless amounts of things in the relative experience that we could endlessly improve on. Like there's no end to that process, you see. So I feel like there's a beauty there, because we're coming at it from a place that's devoid of expectation. That's that desirelessness. It doesn't really matter if the room's clean or not. You're still going to be in bliss, like this type of thing, right? And then at the same time, there may be natural arising desires or natural arising preferences to want to, let's say, clean the room or handle this aspect of your experience, your life in some form, in a way that feels correct, you know and correct, I'd say a better word is actually just feels natural. I think that's important. Like I think, I know in my experience, if we've gone a certain period of time living unnaturally in many ways, or not listening to natural tendencies, and this comes in so many factors, like our society, our parents, like there's so many things that are unnatural in our world. So we've gone down routes, of habits that are unnatural, that we think are natural now. But so when we have to go do something that feels natural, it feels like there's resistance, but that's actually like where the blooming, it's like a seed trying to like come out of the earth again, where it's like saying, okay, there are certain habits that may have not been there. And now that you have clear eyes, it's time for these habits to be developed. At least this is what I've experienced post awakening. It's like, okay, the healings of certain things and the realizations of certain areas of my life that I felt I had to really acknowledge now and take care of in the relative sense. That was like a reprogramming of what I viewed to be natural, versus what I had programmed myself previously, or a part of my own karma or whatever, right?
Yeah.
um
So yeah, like what I take from that is reprogramming and the embodiment. Like right now, I recognize the perfection, and I come from a place of the source, but it is not trickled down, as you said. It is not gone into. It's just hanging there and trying to command it, but it doesn't work.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel that. I understand that, and I think this is where, we also come in understanding. We're seeing this more in the kind of new age or awakening community about, psychological healing, mental healing, physical healing, emotional healing. There's so many layers to the healing process that's what makes it so unique for each of us, right? Because, it's like someone who awakens who has, say, a lot of stored trauma. That trauma will heal very quickly as awakening has rooted, but at the same time, it also can create certain nuances to the path that can be quite challenging, right? Because it has to be looked at in a particular way.
Mm.
But the beauty, and this is kind of what we went in last week. I think you've done enough probably self inquiry and type of work, but the technique we did last week, um, that process of identifying, points in the body. We may do that meditation today, right? And really feeling into where resistance lies in any particular subject. um, this I have found to be one of the most potent practices, because it helps us embody that kind of transcendent self-inquiry process, of looking to find the source of creation, the source of perception, which is a very like masculine dominant practice. It's very like we're going straight to the end, like pure self, pure nothingness. In the same light, we're using that approach, but we're focusing it upon literally the body. Where does energies arise in the body, specific emotional points like stuck energies or what have you, in relation to any particular subject matter, right? So if it's in, you brought up cleaning, if you have a resistance to cleaning, or if you have a resistance to a certain relationship or a certain topic, a COVID or whatever, there's so many things that may trigger these points of energy in the body. And then by way of focusing on that and really going into that and exploring it and seeing like what is actually there, like, like just observing it, that's really the process of that acceptance, because you're getting to the most fundamental layer of acceptance, which is to accept or to feel into, the intensity of these energies that are present. Yeah. So yeah, this is great, man. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's really nice. Um, but yeah, so if there's anything else that anyone wanted to, explore on any particular topic, we could get into that. But I did want to. There's a couple things I wanted to uh, just talk about in regards to. I mean, this kind of segues into a lot of the things that I kind of intended for today, particular on the notion of that. I mean, we're talking about acceptance. We're talking about appreciation. These are all like really core fundamental keys on the path for a very simple reasoning, and that's the recognition that um, the only thing that ever could be created from this moment moving forward is only going to be a delayed manifestation or a delayed reflection of the moment that came before it. So I'm gonna just kind of like describe that a little bit better. Like when we look at the third dimensional hologram that we exist in, the experiences that we have, everything that we're perceiving in that hologram, we've heard maybe times before that everything is a product of karma. Let's say, everything is manifesting based on choices before. As a really simple definition, the choices we've made before manifest the consequences or the results of what we're perceiving in our hologram, in our world. Now, if we get really specific on this, the hologram in third dimension is a delayed response to the feelings, the thoughts, the words, the energies we're emitting into that hologram. And we went into this last week, so you can all go and rewatch that. So what this is describing, what this is focused on, is understanding that when we're faced with certain situations that come to us in our reflection, depending on our level of self-responsibility, of awareness, of recognition of the fact that everything that we perceive is a reflection of our emanation, of what we've co-created, what we've also participated in. Depending on the level of degree we have awareness to that, will be the degree in which we can come to accept what is being revealed, what is presenting itself, right? Because if we believe that we haven't played a part in something that we are now observing in our reality, all that's happening there is we're not aware of the fact of some level of our being that has emanated this energy and thus now seeing it in the reflection. There's some aspect to self that we're potentially not aware of. So obviously, when someone hears this, the initial thing or the initial intention with that is to go and see, okay, like, well, what's wrong with me? Like, what am I doing wrong that's manifesting this thing that I don't like? So there becomes this like this looking to find, and that's practical. Like there's a naturalness to that, because I think that's the fundamental foundation of spiritual practice. There's a simultaneous self-honesty, like being honest with ourselves of something that may not be so fun, something that we may not enjoy or whatever. And at the same time, being compassionate, coming to a sense of appreciation for the fact that what is being observed now, what is being experienced in the reality, is something that can further reveal to us who we are, how we co-create reality, what healing that we can further explore and uncover and dive into. Like there's many different layers to that. So a lot of it is about resting in the middle with. It's literally like resting in the middle between external and internal. You're resting in this very beautiful sweet spot where you recognize the nature of, like, let's say, what's behind you, all of the levels of your energy body, all the layers of yourself that project into what's in front of you, which is the external reality, the world that we make up in this physical sense, and the things that now are reflected back to you because of what has flowed down the channel, we could say, you know? So you where you exist and where you are is really in no particular place. There's no action. It's kind of like exponential graph, you know, you can't actually ever get to that point where the line touches. So this is that point between internal and external where you reside. You're not really in internal or external. There's no really a point where you actually reside. Where you are is just the I wouldn't even say the awareness. You're just here. There's just I can't even put it into words, you know, like there's nothing to really say to it. There is just a here-ness, a nowness, a presence that is perpetually aware of it all, seeing it all, experience it all, aware of it all in the sense of knowing, like knowing that even though intellectually you may not know why a certain thing in your life, a relationship, a topic, whatever, has manifested in a certain way, you may not cognitively know that. There's an aspect to you that does know, right? There's always an aspect of you that does know. So the more there can be a resting, and as Aditya was saying, like a certain acceptance of life and a depth of appreciation of life as it's appearing, which can be done, you know, we can do that in a practice, but we also can just do it in a fundamental moment to moment way of living that just simply takes care of what's necessary in the most practical of senses. I think this is what it really boils down to, and anyone else can chime in on that. I feel like the most practical way we can come to a place of appreciation and acceptance is to just take care of what is needed, right? So for instance, it's like if my dog comes in and takes a poop on the floor, like we can get into a million different ideas about like what that means and where that's coming from, and you know what the karma of this is. You know, there's an endless amount of things I could do with that, but the reality is it would be probably the best choice to just pick up the poop like right in the moment that it's done, you know? And that's just a natural reaction, a natural response to what has just occurred. You know? So we could say that although that wasn't necessarily like a meditation of appreciation or acceptance or some technique, we could say that that potentially was the most accepting and appreciative action in that moment, because it was just what's necessary, you know, like it's just what is arising and what is now here and what is now presenting itself. So we don't really need to make it too complex, you know, in regards to whatever it is that we're experiencing, because you know, it's often like the example that I give, which I mean, it has a lot to do with going to the bathroom, it seems, whether it's the dog or ourselves, but it's very applicable in the sense that if we have to go to the bathroom, we get up and we go to the washroom, and we just make that happen, right? There's a very natural unfolding to that process. And so the reason why I give these really fundamental examples, because they encapsulate the entirety of the complexity of the universe in them, in the sense that like if we're trying to figure out something bigger, you know, like our purpose of the universe, or in this time in history, in this great transition, or what we're supposed to do, or where we're supposed to be, or all these different ideas, well, the reality is that if we fundamentally come back to what is actually necessary, like what is calling from a place of natural need, a natural meeting to the moment, like we match the moment, we match what's necessary with our action, with our word, with our emanation, you know, with our attention. So in that light, these things are often quite clear, actually. Like, you know, I've been sitting on the chair for a little bit and I'm starting to feel my body, so I can feel that at the end of this call I'm probably going to sit up and go for a walk. You know, it's not that complex. There's nothing to really think about it. It's just a natural movement of the body. Maybe I'm going to go do some yoga. Maybe I'm going to just go move my body around. There's a myriad of things that can be done. You know, the options of where we're headed can be different, but the principle is fundamentally the same. It's get up and move the body. Yeah. So I feel like, you know, if we focus upon that in our own experience, and I'm giving my own, you know, personal examples that are going to be infinitely different for each of us, of whatever it is that is manifesting in our experience, that is calling for a natural matching, you know, matching our action, matching ourselves with that moment, we're going to know, you know, what's needed, right? We're not going to be confused in desire and wants, right? It's like, okay, if the dog comes and does it there, but I wanted to go and make dinner, well, it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for a couple of reasons. The first reason is it's not going to take that long to actually do what's necessary. And then you may be able to explore your want after. But maybe if you focus on what's necessary, the want actually will change based on that flow, right? The river, the stream has maybe changed a little bit. So now you're going down this stream and it's a little bit different, but maybe that's actually where you were meant to go. So you see that there's a beauty of focusing on what's necessary, because when we focus on what's necessary, then the naturalness of desire manifesting, whatever is necessary for experience, that also reveals itself, right? That also just kind of naturally comes. It's coming back to what Aditya brought up. When we come into that desireless space, maybe the ego kind of comes into hopelessness or this confusion initially, because it's like, well, I never actually wanted anything. It's only the needs of the body that actually were required. All the makeup of the plethora of desires from our conditioning and our what we've been taught, or what we're expecting, or what we've been expected, what's been expected from us. All of these things are just figments of the egoic mind that have come up, that really were never actually there at the fundamental level. So when we come back to that initial space, there's a period, and that period can last for a while. That can be weird, very interesting. I'm sure we're all and have experienced that to certain degrees. Um, but then as it starts to bloom from this place of what's necessary, what's actually needed, oh boy, then everything is so much more beautiful, because we see that the desires that are met in every moment are exactly what was necessary, not too much and not too little, like the perfect quantity. you know we're not falling into greed and in all of these, like gluttony and lustfulness, like all of these original. I don't like to use the word sin, but it is actually a very applicable term, I feel, like lustfulness, greed, um these like lethargy and all of these things that are just going overboard, too much, taking too much than what's actually needed, right? So there's actually a learning of resting, more resting, to be honest. And I feel, most of us probably are getting to know that. But depending on the degree of how much we've been involved in the world, in traditional things and expectations and desires, resting is a very tricky thing. I mean, and fundamentally, this is just, like meditation. Just for most people, meditation is such a daunting task, because it's requiring one to really actually rest. Instead of being forced to meditate, which is just sleeping at night, it's just another form of meditation. Instead of being forced to do that because your body's just so tired, you're actually consciously choosing to rest, to take a break from the intensity of the movements of desire and all of the above. Yeah. And so this is, in my view, the true definition of abundance, right? And I hope it's becoming more and more clear. I feel it is for those that are here, and for those who are joining the group coming into that. It was just a kind of one vertical that we're focusing on right now, this topic of abundance, whatever, because fundamentally that's really where it starts. And if we have a clear setting, a clear vision of what that is for ourselves, and how that feels, then the topics of like what we want to create in our life, like the actual resources we need, or the relationships, or the amounts of something, certain foods or money, or like all the relative stuff, like that stuff kind of handles itself pretty easily, pretty naturally, because it's just a product of what is natural and what are we naturally placing our attention upon in any one particular moment, or sequence of moments. All right. So let me know how that sits. I'm going to check on Facebook too. I don't know who else is there. I know there's some people still watching, or if there's any questions on that. But boy, has that been a transformative teaching in my own experience, and endlessly so, right? What is actually necessary versus what is desired, what is wanted, and then projecting that desire and want on top of the need, and then what is actually necessary, right? And boy, we can just be so much more efficient. So much more efficient in our experience. Yeah. So I'll leave it there for a moment to see, if there's anything else that wants to be shared on that. or questions or comments or anything unrelated that, we can get into. I didn't want to go too long today. Maybe keep it, next 10-15 minutes. If you're new and you haven't gone into the Telegram group, I'd recommend watching, and also to do the technique we went through last week. These practices. It's important that it's focused on, and if you're here and wanting to focus on it, that it's actually practiced. It's a funny thing that I've been exploring actually in within myself, of putting this out, freely as a gift. It's a process of my own experimentation, because often in the kind of personal development community, people think that, if you charge for something, that people will appreciate it more for some reason. I mean, we could see practically what that reason is, but like, let's say for some reason, someone's going to appreciate it more because they spend thousands of dollars on something and they're actually going to practice it. But for me, I'm experimenting with the way of seeing if that is even really true, because I don't actually think it is. I think that what happens is when people like upfront pay for something, they are investing in something. They're making an agreement and a commitment because of the symbol that money presents, the symbol, the image that money represents, because that money is so intertwined in so many ways with, we could say, our identity, our survival, all the different things, that symbol and that image, if we invest a certain amount into something, it's like we're putting a part of ourselves in. But that fundamentally is not true. That's illusionary. So the idea that that's happening and then someone feels more committed, in my view, I think is only short-lived. I don't think there's actually any difference between the amount of people that are going to practice this method, whether I charge $1,000 for it or not. So it's a really funny thing that I'm exploring with this, because the reality is, in the new way, because this is part of my teaching around the gift economy, and living from that place of giving without the expectation of things in return, because that's truly how we're going to be most fulfilled. And funny enough, in my own experimentation with this, although my life is not all gifted, it can be quite difficult in our society to live like that. I've tried it, but in the true reality, in my experience, the appreciation of things coming in return from all directions, from my natural giving in whatever way that I'm engaging that, whether it's related to this or not, is always coming in abundant amounts, abundant amounts. And I say this particularly because the essence of this teaching, infused with what we're talking about with this practice, and the attainment of abundance, or the manifestation of abundance, has to come from proper footing. And if it's coming from improper footing, or if it's coming from a falsified intent, we end up experiencing that consequence, like the energy of that, in whiplash form, right? So for instance, yeah, like if we only will commit to something when we're investing, let's say X amounts of dollars or whatever, at some point that's going to run itself dry. At some point we're going to see that we cannot rely on any external aspect of ourselves to be committed to something, right? This is important, and this is why you can't really pay yourself to enlightenment. You can't really pay yourself to realizing the source. It has to come from a deep deep knowing inwardly, a deep desire inwardly. And like I was saying, the people, the people that are going to do this method and really practice it, or any method, any technique, and I see this everywhere in the personal development space because I've been in it for 10 years. The amount of people that actually put it into practice versus the amount of people that say enroll or pay the fee or engage or whatever is such a small fraction, because it is only that small fraction of people who have come to a place of clear intent with what they're actually looking to experience, know, realize about their journey. And this isn't a judgment. Everyone's going to come to it at their own time. But I'm saying this as a reminder to check ourselves always, to come back. I'm always coming back to check myself. Like, what is my actual intention with what I'm doing here, with what I'm engaging in, with what I'm committing to? And is this actually bringing what I feel like it's going to bring? Right? Or what I feel like I'm preferring, and why I'm engaging it in the first place. Right? And And so, like I said, whether someone is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on all these personal development tools and using very little, or someone's just running around trying to get the next technique from the next free teaching or the next free video, and again, not really practicing any of it, it's the same energy. It's the same energy. And I see it all the time, and it's just something that we have to be cognizant within ourselves. And I know it's and I know I see it because that's certainly what I've done on the path, like years and years of just going from teacher to teacher, technique to technique, practice to practice, but just dancing, you know what I mean, like dancing around things and not really getting to the fundamental thing of like what's needed, right? Going back to that thing, like what's needed. We could like see the dog shitting on the floor and be like, okay, I got to do my appreciation acceptance meditation now. Or we can just pick up the poop, And so this is a message to all of us, myself included, of seeing in our experience, like what is actually necessary in our lives, in this present time, in our communities, in our experience, in our local, spaces, because we're in a time right now where so many of the wants and the desires, they're going to continue to fall apart. Like the things that have been built on those foundations, they'll continue to fall apart because they weren't on a strong foundation to begin with. There was nothing true about them to begin with, other than the fact that everything is source, but source will reveal itself, in truth. So if we've tried to put, it's like religion has tried to put all these symbols and images on top of what God or what the truth is. So now God and the truth will reveal itself and say, this is actually what I am. And so that's awakening, in my view. That's embodiment. That's our lives. That's our experience. That's this journey. It's source revealing itself and saying, this is what's actually true. And for a period of time, whatever period of time, aeons, eternities, lifetimes, I know in my experience, I may have seen it otherwise. I may have seen that no, I'm saying what God is. I'm saying what my God is, or what my ideals are, what my idols are. What my desires are. In so many ways, desires, idols, gods, the same thing. What we desire is what we've idolized, what we've deified as something that's greater than the source itself. And so we're all being humbled to that. And that's why we're being humbled. I talked about this a couple months ago, where I said that the beautiful symbol of this in the macro, in the collective space, is the topics of protests that have happened over the course of, let's say, the past, let's say 5 years, 10 years. We've had protests about, economic collapse, 2008, and these things. We had protests about global warming, protests about women's rights, protests about racism, protests about pedophilia, child trafficking, protests about lockdowns, our rights. Now what's happening? Protests around food. I mean, we're talking about in the westernized world. Of course, there's protests, there's people all over the globe, that billions of people that don't have food. But of course, we're very privileged here. So now we're tasting it. We're tasting what's been under the surface. So these billions of people, these millions of children, these billions of other races that have been, suppressed over the years, billions and billions and billions of beings who have been suppressed, abused, taken advantage of, have never really tasted the fruit of what it means to have all their needs met. So now that's been the dark little thing under the rug that has now, come to the surface on the collective scale in this past year. I mean, obviously it was always there, but in this collective space, it's coming more and more to the surface. So we're facing this, and the reaction to that is in the response of these protests, which I'm not a huge protester, but I definitely see the benefit of it. And I see the beautiful symbol of what it's presenting. That as we've gone through the evolution of these protests are becoming more and more grounded to the most fundamental aspects of life. Because now the most recent, like look in the West, the snowstorms in Texas and stuff and all these things, people can't even access food, and I've been talking about this for the past year, that we saw this coming. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing protests now going to emerge around basic survival needs. We're being humbled. This is the symbol. We're being humbled back to what is actually needed, what is actually important. right? So it started, like global warming and women's rights. And I'm not saying there's any particular order here, but we're seeing that over time it's intensified, and we've come to the to more and more of a tipping point. It's endlessly the tipping point because now it's exponential. So there's, just endlessly going. But this is a really beautiful symbol collectively, I feel. And it, I guess fundamentally it's going to come back to the primary topic, the fundamental topic, which is God, or the golden rule: treat another as you desire to be treated. That's God in form. That is the supreme, that is the most basic level teaching, as much as it's the supreme teaching. I've said that statement probably 100 times, but it certainly is that. And so that is, in so many ways we could say that is the only protest. That is the only protest happening, and that's fundamentally the final protest, and we are in that now. Um, so that's an important message, and so within ourselves, this is really when we fundamentally come back to it. It's the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that matters in our own experience. Where do we each reside with that in mind, within the how we treat other people topic, of all races, of all types, of all equalities, of all nations, of all beings, of infinity, of every walk, of every ounce of life that we come across, which also includes inanimate beings, inanimate objects, you know our room, like, it was funny, Adita, you brought that up, because I cleaned my room right before this. I was like, oh yeah, I think I need to clean my room, so that happened. And it's like everything we come in contact with, everything we experience, interact with, yeah, how do we treat it? What's our relationship with it? So I feel like, yeah, this is probably the fundamental uh, basis of appreciation, of abundance, of acceptance, of all these things we've talked about today. It's not it's well, I mean, it was kind of brought up this week, where I think it was Kareen who asked about, like, maybe she hadn't been doing the meditation every day or whatever. But the real question is not if you're doing the meditation every day. The question is, are you in tune with the truth every day? Like, is that the intention? Is that what's fundamentally the focus? Because it doesn't really matter the practice that you're doing. Meditation, like the idea of doing meditation, is an icing. It's icing on the cake. It's a practice, right? To become meditation, to become the nature, the truth that moves everything, the truth that the source that makes a way, that parts sees, everywhere we go, and when we speak, when we think, when we feel, when we engage life. This is fundamentally what we're coming back to. So as that's embodied, then just hearing these words becomes a meditation. Like, it becomes a principle that we embody, where it's not a practice, it's an actual, like, direct knowing. And in my view, in my experience, any teaching you look at that you really resonate with, you experience it by reading it, by exploring it as a meditation, because it's both a description of reality as much as it's a practice. Like, the golden rule is a practice. We can consciously practice that. It's also a description of reality. It's a description of God, right? That's a real fundamental way to look at it all, right? It's understanding that the most potent teachings we can come into and feel and meditate upon are both practices and descriptions of what's true. And I mean, that's it. There's nothing more than that. That's all the intention has to be, is to find that, to look for that, to seek that, and to know that. And it's revealed, which I feel each of us are, um, you know, exploring. So yeah, I feel good with that. I mean, if there's anything to add, or comments, questions, I mean, feel free. But I feel good for today. I feel that, you know that's our meditation. I feel complete with that. Um, yeah, just gonna check on Facebook there. But yeah, so I mean, other than that, I feel good. I hope each of you do as well. I hope this was helpful in some form. Yeah, if you want to be in the Telegram group and you're not already, the link's on my Instagram. If you're on Facebook and not on Instagram, just add me there. We're still going strong on these platforms. I feel like, they'll be what they are for a time, but Telegram feels like a good, trajectory. I don't absolutely love the platform, but it works for what we're doing. If you feel called to support, donate, obviously links are in there too for Patreon and donations and all that. What else? I don't think there's much else. I'm going to add a few more things into that group. We are going to be starting. Spring is coming, at least in the Western hemisphere. So spring is coming, and we will be going into another. There's going to be another vertical. These are all just kind of like vertical topics. Another topic on cleansing and detox and all that. I'll be clarifying a lot of things for people on that journey, because springtime kind of that naturally happens. You may naturally be in that flow where you want to clean up in some form. So starting with the body, and the channels and the pathways of the body in the physical sense, and emotional and mental as well. I feel that's quite important. So we're gonna be starting a group for that, and have some other things that'll be coming about. But if there's any other questions at any point, obviously send me a message whenever. But other than that, I enjoyed this. This is very nice and helpful for me, just the same as all of you, because I receive these messages from wherever they are, and we're here. So yeah, love to all of you. Enjoy the rest of your day and your night or wherever, and we'll connect soon.